Welcome to Stationery Test Drive. My name is Minjal.
I'm Samir.
And I'm Vishal. And today we will be looking at the Hauser Inx Jazz Fountain Pen. But before all that, Minjal, why don't you tell us something that you've been working on?
So I recently enrolled for a handmade book binding course with Kagazi. You can check the account on Instagram.
We'll put those links in the description.
Kavya Agarwal actually conducted the classes, and this was a lot of fun. We just started with a stack of papers. We bound it ourselves, and it turned out to be a lot of fun.
So can you, before we move on, can you tell us the different types of bindings you've done? Because these are three different looks.
So this is essentially a double section binding. What you could do is, maybe take ruled paper on one side and, plain paper, and there is this section in between.
Okay.
That differentiates the two, types of papers that you want to use.
Okay.
This is supposed to be the basic, single section binding.
Okay.
This was the easiest.
Right.
Saddle stitch.
The saddle stitch, and this is
very complex.
This is like a braid, if I may say so. And there's a little section over here.
And does that mirror on the other side?
It does.
So that adds strength, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
It does,
it's kind of the spine for...
And you could attach things here.
Right. Well, very nice. We will have links to Kavya, you said, and Kagazi.
Kavya Agarwal.
Do check them out if you're in Bombay, in Mumbai. And I'm sure they do classes.
Kavya does a lot of online workshops.
Right.
They're actually based, I believe, in Gujarat.
Okay.
That's where her setup is. But she has started conducting online workshops as well.
Samir, what have you been up to?
I have been up to updating my videos on YouTube under my paper art account, which is Paper Nautic. I started this many years ago when I was doing some basic origami videos. I've just been working on adding some more there and updating my thumbnails and just kind of getting back into that.
Well, very good. And I have also thematically to the Hauser pen, I've been making a video chronicling my process with a single sketchbook and sort of notebook that I have. It's called 2 Terrible Pages. I used this pen a lot in it to write and to draw and to just ruminate. It lasted me pretty much through the first year of the pandemic, 2020. So yeah, I've been putting together a video on my channel, All Vishal. You can find other videos on that channel, including one on a portrait sketchbook I did, which also features things done with the Hauser pen. But right now I'm trying to do something that's a bit more involved, not just a regular walkthrough of a sketchbook. And hopefully by the time this video is out, that will have seen some traction. It should also be out soon. So to the tool at hand today, the Inx Jazz Liquid Fountain Pen by Hauser. We have 3 of them here. It says Hauser, Germany. It's a very plasticky fountain pen, which I can never seem to open right. And that's why I'll tell you why later. Has this hooded nib. It comes in a variety of colors, and we found these down our street. Samir, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, we were just as stationery lovers, we love to drop by our local stationery store and just see what new and interesting, strange things they have. And I think on one of those kind of hanging shelves, we came across these Hauser pens in a little flat pack with a bunch of extra cartridges, which said, XL. So we thought we might as well try them, and these were very, very reasonably priced. These are
50 rupees is what we paid for them, which is about 75 cents in the US, I guess.
Something like that.
Which for a fountain pen, for people of our age, we're old, elder millennials. Um, the concept of a cheap fountain pen was almost non-existent growing up. There were cheap fountain pens and they weren't good. They certainly weren't 50 rupees or the equivalent of at that time. Uh, I think we all in school had something that people would call a hero pen, which was a classic model that might still exist.
Yeah.
But honestly, I never liked or enjoyed writing with a hero pen.
I think the hero pen is kind of like a classic car. It has its quirks and you needed to deal with them.
Right.
I did like the ink filling pipette system,
Right,
which meant
yeah.
that your hands would be completely spoiled by the end of it.
That pipette never had a brace to press down in some of them, or
Yeah.
they break very easily, I remember. So you would be pressing and pressing against that, and not only were your hands full of ink after a while, but you just have gouged in these nice little marks on your hands. But the Hauser, much to our surprise, is a very decent pen for writing, for drawing, for pretty much every use we've put it to. It is well beyond its 50 rupee value for us. We've used it for a year or two now. Mine is very beaten up, as you can see, to the point where the barrel cracked. I put a band-aid on it, literally, because that just gives you a nice place to rest that's soft. And also at the time I didn't have tape at home. Minjal and Samir have kept theirs in better condition, but I think mine has more mileage overall.
Absolutely, I've used it. I have used it for quite a few drawings, but nowhere as much as you have.
So today we all did some things with our respective Hauser pens. So let's just show them to you now. And I think we've all gone for some degree of writing, so that it's not just drawings. But yes, this is the range of things you can do with a Hauser Inx Jazz liquid fountain pen. That's a mouthful, and I'm sure Samir will tell us why they are Hauser Inx Jazz liquid fountain pen in these wonderful colors.
That's expecting a lot, that I should know why they chose 3 names instead of 1.
Well, we can make it up, I'm sure. It's not like people are checking.
You mean like they did?
Like they did? Yes, tell us about how they made things up.
I don't know if they actually made things up, but the point is that Hauser is technically a German brand. I think from the history that we can find online, the German brand started, at least as a writing instrument brand, started somewhere in 1931 or so.
30s, yes.
But the current form of it, of course, is manufactured in India by Flair Pens, which I think they started in 2014 or so. So, from my understanding, maybe the German brand lasted, a century in some small way, and then became one of those brands that people can license out, and that's what we're seeing here.
And this sort of licensing creep almost of brands that start off in Europe and end up somewhere in Asia is quite common. Reynolds has a similar fate.
In fact, I would say that Flair Pens, who manufacture the Hauser, might have kind of started off with Hauser in 2014, and then they are the ones who took on Reynolds in 2016. So maybe this was a test bed of some sort.
So it's a cheap pen. It's a good pen. What's bad about it? Now I've talked about the barrel breaking because that's just, honestly, did not expect it to last this long either. But yeah, what happened to your pens when you were using them? Have they lasted fine? Are they okay?
As you've found out, I mean, they're made of really, really cheap light plastic. So it's not something that you can throw around, keep under a heavy weight, or
even a lightweight,
or physically sort of challenge in any way. But as far as the actual writing mechanism is concerned, I mean, it's probably one of the smoothest pens I've used.
From the position of drawing, I'm just putting down some lines here. The thing I like about it is that while there is a certain, it's not like the smoothest thing in the world, the amount of control you have at all angles, and this is a problem with fountain pens, where they'll work at a certain angle and then they won't work Like drawing a circle with a fountain pen is sometimes quite difficult, even on modern ones.
Yeah.
But this one has a certain character to it that I like.
And there's that slight flex of the nib that gives you
Yes,
that.
the flex. Let's flex and talk about flexing, because you can really push this and get a good degree of line weight change all the way up to very fine.
And of course, as a person who draws, just like Vishal does, it's really great when you have a fountain pen which you can not just use the right way around,
But
but the wrong way.
the wrong way. This is something
That
that
is just
maybe some of you discovered in school.
that
But-
is just an excellent amount of variety of line.
And as you can see, I think worked my pen more, so it only gets finer over time, which might be a problem with the writing. Isn't that true, Minjal? Do you want something that's more consistently thick rather than in some ways noodly and scratchy like this?
I think it comes down to getting used to a particular pen. When I wrote with this, it was very similar, like you mentioned, to the Hero pen that I first started using. And yes, you have to be consistent with the pressure, because you know that if you lift the pressure, it's probably going to go down to fine lines, which I did not want.
I think the reason that you found it very similar to the Hero pen is the way that this nib and the way
Getting
the
away from us.
I mean it didn't break, so that's a good thing. The way that this nib and the feed is set up is very similar to a Hero pen.
Yeah.
In that most regular fountain pens have an exposed nib with a feed that goes under it, whereas this has this kind of hood which covers up most of the nib other than the very thin bit, which is exactly like a Hero pen. So the reason for this, I assume, is that you get to use a nib that's much thinner since it has this support.
And that gives it the flexibility as well.
And that
Right.
brings us in some ways to the other weird thing that an artist has a problem with. So here is my very artistic test paper from yesterday, and this is a piece of tissue actually. It's because when I had not used this pen for a long time, 5 or 6 months, it had dried up in here, but it was empty. I'm using a converter actually on this one, which is, I think it was a Parker converter, and thankfully it works on this pen. So this Parker converter costs about 5 or 6 times the actual pen, but I couldn't use it on my regular pen because there are different sizes in terms of and it's not a perfect fit. You can see the ink is actually, this is
Leaking out a
Schaefer,
little.
this is Schaefer's cyan ink, I think. But yes, it goes well into this reservoir, which is, I think, not a feature of Hero pens, right? This is more of a modern
The convenient fountain pens.
right. So
Yeah.
your ink, you'll realize from your fountain pen, pretty much goes away from the cartridge. If you're an old school person who's just used to seeing and checking it from there, it goes into this reservoir, which has a comb structure almost.
I believe that almost every fountain pen past when it was first invented has some sort of structure like
Right.
this. It's just that it's
This
not
one's
always visible.
yeah, this one is exposed and visible. So before I had Schaefer sepia ink in it, and I done drawings with that. So I had to first clean out the thing by wetting it and getting rid of debris of build-up, which was easy enough. And then the sepia had to be slowly bled out onto paper. And by this time, I had already filled in the cyan ink. So that's what the cyan ink looked like just out of my ink pot. But then that is what it looks like when it mixes with the residue of sepia. And if you know your color theory, blue and brown very often will give you these turquoise green, but like muddy green colors. And that's something I think you can possibly lean into, because if the colors are showing up right on here, I started the drawing here, and then as it went along, you can see it's greener here, and then it slowly starts becoming bluer and bluer and bluer as you go. So I would suggest, if you have access to many kinds of inks and you can use this function of the cartridge plus the reservoir, fill in half of one, take it out, replace it with a different cartridge, shake it all about and see what you get, because I think this is interesting and beautiful, and I almost wish that this green had lasted a bit longer, and so that I could get an actual almost graded line.
It's very interesting that you have found a positive aspect of this particular feature of this pen, because it's generally considered to be a huge negative.
Yes.
So a quick primer on what makes a fountain pen the way it is.
I can't even open that.
I mean, obviously, besides the barrel and the lid, you of course have the ink that's in the cartridge or in a converter, and then it goes from here into this comb structure. Now, the comb structure and this little piece of plastic below the nib, that's the feed. And every fountain pen has one of those. So what that does is to take in the ink from the cartridge and let it flow to the nib in a controlled manner, while also not letting air bubbles or things like that stop it. Now, the thing about a cheap fountain pen is that in a regular fountain pen of good quality, the feed needs to be of extremely good quality and material. And the same goes with the nib. The feed kind of sits under the nib, and just due to capillary action, the ink goes into the nib. Now, in a cheap fountain pen, you don't want to spend as much time engineering this feed. And to get away with a simpler design which you can use across various nibs, you probably can't see it on video, but
We'll put in an insert.
there's a bit of fabric that's
Right.
between the feed and the nib here.
I can just see it at the edge.
You can kind of make it out when you're cleaning this pen, and that's what's called a wick feed. So it's literally like a piece of fabric that wicks the ink from the inner part of the feed up to the nib.
So it's a felt tip fountain pen.
Exactly. So because you have a piece of fabric that's carrying the ink from the lower part of the feed to the nib, you don't need to have precision engineering for the capillary action to work perfectly. So what this means is that when you're making a cheap fountain pen, maybe Hauser just has one feed design which it uses across all of its pens. And by having that fabric in between, they don't need to make special nibs for special feeds for special pens all the time. So it's a great trick. Now, the reason that purists will hate a big feed is because it absorbs some of the ink and holds on to it. Now that's
As happened here.
which is what happens here. So when you clean out, when you get a new piece of ink, a new color of ink coming in from the back, that wick is still holding on to the old color, and that's where you get the
blending.
that blending that's happening. Now, the reason that most people don't like this kind of feed is because when you wash this pen, water sticks to that fabric.
Yes.
And it takes much longer for the pen to restart than a normal capillary action pen would. But having said that, just as Vishal mentioned, I think I actually find this to be quite a nice pen to kind of clean and...
Yeah, it's much... I've used some more old school fountain pens and it takes as long to clean them. I'm sorry, this is... Yes, it's cheap and strange and the results are chaotic, but I think if you lean into that chaos, you will get a nice result. I mean, I'm happier with this test. I'm as happy with this piece of tissue as I am with this for some reason, aesthetically, without even really...
And I think most importantly, look at the gorgeous piece of design that this is.
I mean, that is just like if mine is pretty sober.
Do you even know where to look?
Yeah, I think this green, if it's showing up on camera the way it is in real life, my God, it's like you can see it across the room. You could see it from the surface of Mars. It is. It sang to us. It called us out. We walked into the stationery store with all this clutter of stuff and we saw this on a shelf and we were like, I need this in my life.
But we've been singing its praises long enough. Minjal, what have you felt about writing with this? Because we always come at this through the point of view of people who draw rather than write.
So, if you remember, we were discussing, the handwriting improvement books that, as kids we were forced to fill.
You were forced to fill
Yes.
handwriting improvement books?
Yes, we all had pattern writing books in school. Everyone remembers that. At least in India, we had to fill multiple books to get our handwriting straight and right.
Maybe we were just irresponsible.
No, we were educated and brought up by human beings, but that's a different matter.
So I did some research on who actually came up, with these books. The penmanship styles that children actually use in school. So there's an educator by the name of Marian Richardson. She was somebody who observed how children would paint, and she observed their hand movements, and she came up with two distinct styles of handwriting, say, improvement or handwriting techniques. So I actually was very dedicated, and I bought one of these books, which is Speed Writing and Improved Handwriting. I am not sure I managed to really improve my handwriting too much, but it was fun.
Folks never say that we don't go to
Extreme
lengths to test out these things that we bring you.
I mean, according to this book, once I use it, I'll be able to make a 2 to 5% difference minimum in all my work. So I'm going to do this, and you tell me what the results are.
But speaking of school and handwriting and doing the right things, Minjal, don't you think there's something that needs to be added here?
Yeah, don't you think something is supposed to be different in this?
Yeah, I mean, see, if I were to grade myself, I would give myself 6 out of 10 for the handwriting. And maybe one of you all can just maybe point out the very glaring mistake in this.
Well, if you have been a long time, and by now we hope you are a long time Stationery Test Drive viewer, you will be very familiar with the Reynolds 045 fine carber new laser tip, since we're doing all the names this week. Ball pen. You've seen our episode on it, you've seen what we did with it, and I suppose we should put it to the use that all of us remember it from in school. I shall do the honors here. I think the standard way was to do this, but do it furiously. I will not do it furiously because like I said, I am a human being. And then something like, see me after class. But it's never actually, I think teachers and doctors share the same kind of handwriting.
Minjal, we're sorry to give you the first red mark ever.
No, my mother will be really proud because I've never had any of these, so I'm really happy.
The things we crave for.
Validation and trepidation in equal measure. Now we've talked about the details of these things, but I just really enjoy using this pen. Like I said, I've used it on dozens of pages in cheap paper, in a cheap notebook, and had some of the best times during the pandemic, or at least whatever you can creatively. You use copy paper, right, Samir? You try to go for the simplest, thinnest papers to...
Yes, and I've used this particular pen on copy paper before to do some drawings, and I just thought that it would be a good test of how well it handles bleeding and things like that. It's pretty good. It's not like I would use this to write two-sided, but
it seems to spread a bit more, as in mine on this paper, which is a cartridge paper. I know that it would take a lot of time to dry, so there's a few smudges here and there, but it seems to go down pretty well on that.
Yeah, and I actually used it very loosely and very roughly in this case, which I wanted to try out, and it's pretty good. I mean, in spite of the fact that I've been kind of using it in a very scratchy way to do this drawing and the writing itself, the line is consistent. It doesn't blot too much. It's a really good usable pen.
Can you tell us about the quotation you have, or if you can read it out, that would be great too.
If a man happens to find himself, he has a mansion which he can inhabit with dignity all the days of his life. I just wanted to write something with the drawing because I think the pen really is a good writing instrument.
I think we've all done that except for Minjal, who hasn't drawn anything. But who is Gregory or Minjal? Do you know? Do you care? I mean, it's a good quote.
Well, if you asked me about George Michael, I would tell you who he is, but sadly no.
So cousin Gregory Michael, you can sing this to the tune of one of the Wham hits, if you would like to.
And when you spoke about cousin Greg, he's everyone's favorite on Succession.
Yes, so I mean, cousin Greg singing "Wake Me Up Before You Go" in a white jeans and shirt is probably what Minjal was going for.
And Tom too.
We're getting off topic very quickly here. But what is this quote, which was supposed to be something? Why don't you read this out for us?
No, we'll get Samir to read it.
Oh, I'm the reader now? Okay. To be alive. To be alive, not just the carcass, but the spark. That's crudely put, but if we are not supposed to dance, why all this music?
I think he has tinnitus. And
leave it to Vishal to come up with the least romantic explanation.
That's because
all of it.
As I said to someone, that's because I am a romantic. And this Easter egg is for about 4 or 5 people will get this. This is from a picture of Orson Welles. And the quote is, "In July." But that makes no sense. And if you know where that quote is from and where that anecdote is from, you and I can be friends. So, this has been the Hauser Germany Inx Jazz liquid fountain pen. Are there any other kind of fountains that are not liquid? Are there solid fountains?
We are paying Vishal extra to know this name and repeat it repeatedly.
Are there solid fountains? Are there gas?
Chocolate fountains.
Chocolate still a fluid, still a liquid.
Yes.
Are there gas fountains? Are there solid fountains? Are there tumbling rocks? Is a landslide technically a fountain?
There are gas fountains on Jupiter.
See, you learn something new every day on Stationery Test Drive, and not just about pens. If you have any other cool facts about Jupiter or its moons,
or stationery, since that's what we're supposed to be talking about,
or ink, capillary action and wicking fountain pens, or if you can tell us whether Gregory Orr is hotter than cousin Greg on Succession, please write to us.
Leave a comment.
Like, subscribe to this. You can subscribe to the Inky Memo newsletter at inkymemo.com. There's links in the description for everything. And over there, you can find these wonderful new products that Inky Memo has carefully and lovingly made. It's good for all your sketching and liquid fountain pen usage needs. I think that's all from us for this episode. We will see you next time with more stationery, more test drives, more interesting facts about them, and nonsense, of course, which we hope you enjoy. Until then, I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And find those liquid fountains in your life and cherish them.